Lena wiped her hands on her apron and looked around the small diner. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, reminding her that the night shift had just begun. For most people, the late hours felt heavy, but for Lena, it was normal. She had been working here for 3 years, and every evening felt the same. Customers came and went, orders were shouted from the kitchen, and she moved between tables with practiced steps. She tried to keep a smile on her face, even though her feet already ached. The diner smelled of coffee and butter, the same smell that clung to her clothes long after she went home. Sometimes she wondered if this would be her life forever, serving food, smiling at strangers, and pretending everything was fine. Inside, Lena carried dreams no one saw. She wanted to study, travel, and write stories. As a little girl, she used to fill notebooks with drawings of faraway places and letters she never sent. But those notebooks now sat in an old box under her bed, collecting dust. Life had forced her to work, to survive, and to forget those dreams. The bell above the door jingled, pulling her out of her thoughts. A family walked in, a couple with 2 young children. Lena greeted them warmly, guiding them to a booth. The little girl smiled shyly, and Lena felt her heart soften. She always had a gentle way with children, as if their laughter could ease the tiredness inside her. "Can I have pancakes?" the boy asked with excitement. "Of course," Lena said kindly. "The best pancakes in town." The family laughed, and for a moment, Lena forgot her worries. She took their order, hurried to the kitchen, and returned with steaming plates. As she placed the food on the table, the children clapped their hands in delight. Moments like this made her job bearable. Even though she earned little, the simple joy she saw in others gave her strength. She walked back behind the counter and poured coffee for an older man sitting alone. He came often, always ordering the same thing, black coffee and apple pie. "Evening, Mr. Howard," Lena greeted. "Evening, child," he replied, giving her a kind nod. She moved around quickly, balancing trays, refilling cups, and offering smiles. To other people, she was just a waitress, but inside, she carried a quiet storm of emotions: tiredness, hope, fear, and longing. As the hours passed, more customers entered. Some were polite, some were silent, and some barely noticed her. Lena had grown used to being invisible. People rarely asked about her day or her life. They only saw the uniform, not the person wearing it. Still, she kept her voice gentle and her hands steady. She had learned that kindness cost nothing, even when the world gave her little in return. Around 9 o'clock, the diner grew busy. Truck drivers stopped for a late meal, office workers came for coffee, and a group of friends laughed loudly at the corner booth. The noise filled the room, mixing with the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the coffee machine. Lena moved faster, balancing orders in her memory. She placed a burger in front of one customer, a slice of pie for another, and rushed back to fetch more drinks. Her mind worked like a clock, ticking with each order and step. But even as she worked, a small ache grew in her chest. She wished someone would look at her and see more than a waitress. She wished someone would notice the tired eyes behind the smile. At that moment, she glanced at the window. Outside, the night spread across the street, dark and endless. The neon sign of the diner glowed faintly, flickering now and then. A cool wind pressed against the glass, carrying the smell of rain. Lena sighed softly, then forced herself to keep moving. She couldn't afford to drift away in thoughts. Customers needed her, and the night was still long. Her manager, Mrs. Clark, passed by and gave her a quick nod. She was strict but fair, and Lena respected her. Still, there were times Lena wished someone would tell her she was doing more than just good enough. The minutes turned into hours, and the diner slowly calmed. The family left, waving goodbye. Mr. Howard finished his coffee and wished Lena good night. She cleared tables, wiped down counters, and refilled the sugar jars. Her body ached, but her routine was so familiar that she moved without thinking. It was an ordinary night, just like so many before it. Nothing seemed unusual, nothing seemed new. Lena told herself she would survive it like always. Yet, deep inside, she couldn't shake a feeling, a whisper that something was about to change. She didn't know what, or when, but her heart felt restless. The world outside was vast, and her small life seemed too small for all the dreams she carried. She tied her apron tighter and gave herself a silent promise. One day, things will be different. One day, I'll step out of this place and into the life I always wanted. She didn't know that night would be the beginning of that change. She didn't know that someone unexpected would soon enter her world, turning an ordinary shift into the story of her life. And as she picked up another tray, preparing for the next customer, the bell above the door jingled again. The sound was normal, but what followed was not. The bell above the door rang, and Lena turned with her usual polite smile. She expected another family or maybe a tired driver, but instead, a tall man in a wrinkled suit entered. His steps were sharp, his face stern, and his eyes restless. He looked around quickly, as if the world annoyed him, and then chose a booth near the corner. Lena picked up her notepad and walked toward him with calm steps. She had served all kinds of customers, kind, quiet, cheerful, and sometimes difficult. She told herself this man was just another face, another order. "Good evening, sir," she said softly. "What can I get for you tonight?" The man didn't look at her. He pulled at his tie and sighed loudly. "Took you long enough to come over. Coffee? Black. And make it quick." His tone was sharp, almost cutting. Lena kept her smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She wrote it down and turned toward the counter. Inside, her chest tightened. She was used to rude words, but each one still stung. She reminded herself not to take it personally. Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe life had been cruel to him, too. Still, she wished he could see her as a human being, not just a servant. She poured the coffee carefully, set it on a tray, and carried it back. As she placed the cup on his table, he muttered, "Finally. I was beginning to think you forgot." Lena nodded gently. "Would you like to see the menu, sir?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Just bring me something decent. A sandwich. Don't make it dry. Last time I was here, the bread was terrible." Lena bit the inside of her cheek. She didn't remember seeing him before, but she kept quiet. "I'll take care of it," she said. She walked back to the kitchen, placing the order quickly. The cook, a heavy-set man named Joe, glanced at her. "You okay?" She forced a small smile. "Yes. Just another customer." But her heart said otherwise. She hated how one person's words could make her feel so small. When the food was ready, she carried it back to the table. The man barely glanced at her as she placed the plate down. He picked up the sandwich, took a bite, and frowned instantly. "Dry. Just like last time," he complained, slamming the sandwich onto the plate. "Do you people even know how to cook? Or do you just serve garbage and call it food?" A few heads turned from nearby tables. The noise in the diner softened as people sensed the tension. Lena's hands trembled slightly. She wanted to explain that the sandwich was fresh, that Joe worked hard in the kitchen, but her voice caught in her throat. "I'll get you something else," she whispered. The man leaned back, crossing his arms. "You'd better. Or I'm not paying for this." Her face burned with shame. She walked away quickly, her steps unsteady. She could feel the eyes of strangers watching her. Her throat ached, as if she had swallowed a stone. Inside the kitchen, she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She wasn't weak, but moments like this made her feel powerless. She had faced worse in life, yet somehow, rudeness cut deeper than silence. Joe glanced at her again. "You don't have to take that. Want me to talk to him?" She shook her head. "No. I'll handle it." But truthfully, she didn't know if she could. The man's voice carried across the diner. "How long does it take to make a simple sandwich? Are you people asleep back there?" Lena's stomach twisted. She grabbed another plate, but her hands felt clumsy. The noise of the diner, once familiar and safe, now pressed in around her. Her mind whispered an old memory when she was younger, hiding in her room after hearing angry voices in the house. Back then, she had no safe place. But here, she remembered something: the diner's hidden panic room. It wasn't large. Just a small, sturdy room built long ago after a robbery. It was rarely used, but she knew it was there, tucked behind the storage area. Her breath quickened. She wasn't in physical danger, but her heart felt cornered. She needed space. She needed a moment to breathe without eyes watching her, without harsh words echoing in her ears. Quietly, she set the plate down, whispered something to Joe, and slipped away toward the back. Her steps were fast but silent. She pushed past the storage shelves and reached the heavy door. With a shaky hand, she unlocked it, stepped inside, and closed it behind her. The room was small and dim, with only a chair and a faint light bulb. But it was safe. The walls muffled the noise, and the air felt still. Lena sank onto the chair, pressing her hands against her face. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She had always promised herself she would stay strong. Yet tonight, the weight felt too heavy. For a moment, she listened to the silence. No clattering dishes, no sharp voices. Just her heartbeat, steady but fast. She told herself she would only stay a few minutes, just until her breath calmed. Then she would step back out, smile again, and finish the shift. But deep inside, she wondered how long she could keep living this way, always hiding her pain, always pretending she was fine. And as she sat there in the stillness, she didn't know that someone else had noticed her sudden disappearance. Someone who would soon step into her story in a way she never expected. Inside the panic room, Lena sat very still. The air was cool, and the faint light bulb above her flickered softly. Her apron felt heavy on her lap, and her hands would not stop trembling. For years, she had worked through tired nights and harsh words, but tonight felt different. Tonight, something inside her broke a little. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Her breath was uneven, and her chest rose quickly, as though she had run a long distance. She tried to whisper courage to herself, the way she used to when she was a child hiding from storms. "You're fine, Lena. Just breathe. Just a few minutes." But even as she spoke, her heart beat faster. The panic room was meant to be a place of safety, but it also felt like a cage. The walls pressed around her, reminding her of how small her world had become. Every day was the same: serve, smile, survive. She wondered if life would always corner her like this, giving her no space to dream, no air to breathe. She closed her eyes and saw the faces of her customers, the laughing children from earlier, Mr. Howard's gentle nod, even the rude man's sharp glare. The images spun in her mind, mixing with her own tired reflection. Her eyes grew wet, but she blinked quickly. She didn't want tears. She wanted strength. Yet strength was hard to find when the world rarely gave her kindness. Minutes passed, though she wasn't sure how many. Outside, muffled sounds of the diner drifted through the walls: the clinking of plates, faint voices, and the low hum of the coffee machine. She wondered if anyone noticed she was gone. Maybe they thought she was cleaning in the back. Maybe they didn't care. But someone had noticed. Near the counter, another man had been sitting quietly when the rude customer arrived. Unlike others, he hadn't laughed at the scene or looked away. He had watched Lena carefully, his sharp eyes catching every detail: her polite smile, her trembling hands, and finally, the moment she disappeared into the back. His name was Ethan. Most people who saw him wouldn't guess who he really was. Dressed simply in a dark jacket, he blended into the crowd like any ordinary diner guest. Few would imagine that he was the owner of the diner chain, a man of quiet power and great wealth. But Ethan preferred it that way. He often visited his restaurants without announcing himself, not for control, but for truth. He wanted to see the places as they truly were, through the eyes of workers and customers. And tonight, what he saw unsettled him deeply. He had noticed Lena before: the way she greeted customers warmly, how she smiled with gentleness that seemed real, not forced. He saw her patience with the children, the kindness she showed to Mr. Howard, and the way she carried herself with quiet strength. She wasn't just a waitress in a uniform. She was someone rare, someone who gave more of herself than the world gave back. So when he saw her walk quickly toward the back with eyes that looked ready to break, Ethan knew something was wrong. At the rude man's table, the half-eaten sandwich still sat untouched. The man muttered angrily to himself, demanding service, but Ethan had already risen from his seat. His calm steps carried him toward the counter, then past it, as if he belonged there. In truth, he did. But before he could go to Lena, he stopped by the rude customer's booth. "Excuse me," Ethan said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was weight in it, like steady thunder before a storm. The man looked up, frowning. "What do you want?" "You've spoken enough," Ethan replied firmly. "Your behavior tonight is unacceptable. You will finish your meal in silence, or you will leave." The man scoffed, leaning back. "And who are you to tell me that?" Ethan's eyes did not waver. "Someone who values respect. Something you seem to lack." The diner grew quiet again. A few customers glanced at the scene with wide eyes, waiting for what would happen next. The man muttered under his breath but finally grabbed his coat. "This place isn't worth it anyway." He tossed a few bills onto the table and stormed out. The bell above the door jingled sharply, then the sound faded into the night. Silence followed for a moment, broken only by soft whispers between customers. Ethan ignored them. His thoughts were not on the man who left, but on the young woman who had hidden away. He moved toward the back, his steps steady. He passed the storage shelves until he reached the heavy door that few people even knew about. His hand touched the handle gently, but he didn't push it open. Instead, he knocked softly. "Lena." His voice was calm, careful. "It's safe now. You don't have to be afraid." Inside, Lena froze. She hadn't expected anyone to come. For a moment, her mind raced. Who was it? What did they want? But the voice was different. It wasn't sharp or impatient. It was steady, warm, and oddly comforting. She held her breath, unsure if she should answer. "I saw what happened," Ethan said quietly from the other side. "No one should speak to you like that. You did nothing wrong." The words sank deep into Lena's chest. No one had said that to her before, not her co-workers, not even her manager. People usually told her to ignore rudeness, to accept it as part of the job. But this man's voice carried something else: understanding. She leaned forward slightly, her hand brushing against the cold doorknob. Her heart still raced, but now for a different reason. Who was he? Why did his words feel so safe? Lena whispered to herself, "Should I open the door?" She didn't know it yet, but the moment she made that choice, her life would begin to change forever. Lena's hand rested on the cold metal knob of the panic room door. Her fingers trembled as if the decision itself was too heavy. For years, she had been told to stay quiet, to accept what came her way, to never make a scene. And yet here was a voice, gentle, calm, and steady, telling her she didn't have to accept it. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Her breath filled the small room. The silence pressed around her until the words from outside returned to her mind. No one should speak to you like that. You did nothing wrong. She exhaled shakily, and before she could stop herself, she turned the knob. The door creaked open slightly, and light from the storage area spilled inside. Ethan stood there. His dark jacket and quiet stance didn't reveal who he truly was, but there was something in his presence, something steady, as if he belonged in any room he entered. His eyes softened when he saw her, and instead of stepping closer, he waited. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. Lena hesitated, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to people asking her that question, at least not with real care. Most asked out of habit, not expecting an answer. I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her. Ethan gave a small nod, as if he understood the words she couldn't speak. "You don't have to go back out yet. Take a moment. The man is gone." Her shoulders loosened slightly, though the tightness in her chest remained. She stepped out of the small room slowly, her eyes darting to the floor as if she feared being judged. But Ethan didn't look at her with judgment. He looked at her with quiet respect. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the diner outside. "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied gently. "You've done nothing wrong. That man was out of line." The words were simple, but they wrapped around her like a blanket. For years, Lena had carried the weight of harsh voices, telling herself she simply had to endure. Hearing someone defend her felt strange, almost unreal. "Still," she said quietly, "I shouldn't have left like that. I was supposed to stay strong." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Strength isn't about staying silent when someone mistreats you. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to protect yourself." His tone was calm, but his eyes carried something more, something that told her he wasn't just speaking for her, but from his own experiences too. For the first time, Lena met his gaze. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no impatience. Instead, she saw sincerity. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "Because you deserved better," he said simply. "And because I couldn't stand by and watch." The answer startled her. People usually looked away when trouble came. Even co-workers often ignored rude customers, telling her to brush it off. Yet here was a stranger, standing firm when he didn't have to. Before she could reply, a sound of dishes clattering came from the kitchen. The diner was still alive with voices, though quieter now. Ethan glanced toward the noise, then back at her. "You should sit for a while," he suggested. "You've been running around since I arrived. Let me order something, and you can bring it when you're ready." "No rush." Lena shook her head quickly. "No, I can't sit. I have work. Mrs. Clark will notice if I stop." Ethan gave her a knowing look. Even the hardest workers need to breathe. The kindness in his tone nearly broke something inside her. For years, she had kept moving, never allowing herself a pause, afraid that if she slowed down, the weight of life would crush her. "Maybe just for a minute," she whispered. He nodded. "That's enough." They stepped away from the storage room and toward a quieter booth near the corner. Ethan gestured for her to sit, but she hesitated again. "I really shouldn't. Just a minute," he repeated, his voice firm but kind. Finally, she lowered herself onto the edge of the seat. Her hands twisted in her lap as if unsure what to do when they weren't carrying plates or pouring coffee. Ethan sat across from her, calm and unhurried. For a moment, silence hung between them. The sounds of the diner faded into the background, the clink of forks, the hum of conversation. It was as if the booth itself held a bubble of stillness. "You handle yourself well," Ethan said at last. Lena blinked. "Handle myself?" Yes, he explained. The way you smile at people, the way you treat them with respect even when they don't return it. That takes strength. More than most realize. Her cheeks warmed slightly. She wasn't used to praise. Most people never noticed her effort. I just try to be kind, she said softly. And that's rare, Ethan replied. His words sat with her, heavy and comforting all at once. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt truly seen. Not as a waitress carrying trays, not as a uniform moving between tables, but as herself, a person with value. Still, doubt crept into her voice. It doesn't matter much. I'm just here. Doing the same thing every day. Ethan leaned forward slightly. It matters more than you think. The world needs people like you. People who give without asking. People who care. She didn't know how to answer. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part whispered that life had always been unfair, that kindness rarely changed anything. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The moment stretched between them, fragile but real. Finally, she stood, brushing her apron. I should get back to work. Thank you, for what you did. Ethan gave a small smile. You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. What? She asked softly. Don't forget that you deserve respect. Always. Her chest tightened at his words. She nodded once, not trusting her voice. Then she walked back toward the counter, her steps steadier than before. What Lena didn't know was that Ethan wasn't just a kind stranger. He carried secrets of his own, and his path was about to cross hers in ways neither of them expected. The night outside the diner grew darker, and the faint drizzle tapped against the windows. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the soft hum of conversations. But for Lena, the world felt strangely quiet. Her heart was still racing from everything that had happened, yet something about Ethan's presence lingered with her, steadying her steps. She moved back behind the counter, pouring coffee for a couple and refilling a sugar jar. Her hands were steadier than before, but her mind was restless. She kept replaying Ethan's words, you deserve respect. Always. It was such a simple thing to say, but no one had ever told her that with such certainty. A few minutes later, Ethan raised his hand lightly. Not demanding, not impatient, just a quiet signal. Lena walked toward his booth, her apron brushing against her knees. Can I get you something now? She asked softly, her voice more relaxed than before. Yes, Ethan said with a small smile. A cup of coffee. And maybe a slice of pie, if you recommend it? Lena let out the faintest laugh, the sound surprising even her. The apple pie is the best. It's Mr. Howard's favorite. Then I'll trust your judgment, Ethan replied. She nodded and returned with the order. The cup clinked gently against the saucer as she set it down, and the sweet smell of pie filled the air. For a moment, she hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him, just as she had earlier. You'll get in trouble if you sit too long, Ethan asked, sipping his coffee. Maybe, Lena admitted. But I guess 1 minute won't hurt. He gave her a thoughtful look. You work very hard. She glanced at her hands, tracing the edge of the table with her fingers. I don't have much of a choice. Bills don't wait. Life doesn't wait. And what about you? Ethan asked. What do you want? The question caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure how to answer. No one had asked her that in years. Most people only wanted to know what she could give them: orders, service, smiles. She hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. I used to dream a lot, writing stories, maybe studying one day. But dreams don't pay rent. So I keep them locked away. Ethan studied her carefully. Dreams are not useless, Lena. They're part of who you are. Without them, life becomes only survival. His words struck deep, and for a moment, she couldn't look at him. She stared instead at the steam rising from the coffee cup, wishing she could believe him. You speak like someone who doesn't know what it means to struggle, she said softly, almost as a whisper. Ethan didn't flinch. I've struggled too. Maybe not the same way, but enough to understand how heavy it feels. Her eyes lifted, curious now. You don't look like it? He smiled faintly, as if amused by her honesty. Appearances can be misleading. Sometimes the people who look the strongest carry the heaviest burdens. Lena studied him more closely. He was calm, yes, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow, a depth she hadn't noticed before. Maybe he wasn't just another customer after all. Why are you here? She asked suddenly. Most people who look like you don't come to small diners like this. Ethan paused, as though deciding how much to reveal. I like to see things as they are. Places like this, they show more truth than fancy restaurants ever could. She tilted her head, puzzled but intrigued. Truth? Yes, he said, his gaze steady. Here, you see people as they are. A family sharing pancakes. A man finding comfort in a slice of pie. A young woman who gives her best even when the world doesn't give back. Her cheeks warmed, and she quickly looked away. You make it sound more special than it really is. It is special, Ethan said firmly. The words sat between them, heavy and gentle all at once. For the first time that night, Lena felt the walls inside her shift slightly. She had built them high over the years, to protect herself from disappointment, from rejection. But Ethan's voice carried a kindness that felt safe enough to let some light through. She wanted to ask him more, who he was, why he spoke the way he did, but she hesitated. A part of her feared the answer. Maybe he was just passing through, and she would never see him again after tonight. Maybe he would vanish like all fleeting kindness did. Still, she couldn't help but whisper, "You're different from other people who come here." Ethan's eyes softened. Maybe. Or maybe I just see what others overlook. Their gaze held for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. A quiet connection, fragile but undeniable. Before either of them could speak again, Mrs. Clark called Lena's name from the counter. Lena quickly stood, smoothing her apron. I should get back, she said. Ethan nodded. Of course. But as she turned to leave, his voice followed her. Lena, don't give up on your dreams. Not yet. She froze for a second, her heart tightening. Then she walked back to her duties, her mind swirling with his words. All night, as she cleared tables and refilled cups, Ethan's voice echoed inside her. She didn't know why his words mattered so much, but they did. They felt like seeds planted in dry soil, small, fragile, but alive. When the last customer left and the diner began to close, Lena glanced toward Ethan's booth. He was still there, calm, finishing his coffee. Something about him felt like more than a passing stranger. And deep down, Lena had the feeling that this was only the beginning, that his presence would change her life in ways she could not yet imagine. The diner clock ticked past midnight. The last few chairs were stacked, and Joe, the cook, had already hung his apron. The air was quieter now, filled only with the faint smell of coffee and the soft sound of rain against the windows. Lena wiped down the counter slowly, her thoughts heavy but alive. All evening, Ethan's words replayed in her mind like a song she couldn't forget. Don't give up on your dreams. Not yet. Dreams. She hadn't allowed herself to think about them for years. They felt like pieces of paper locked away in an old box, gathering dust. But somehow, Ethan had spoken to that hidden part of her, and now it stirred, restless. Long night. The voice startled her. She looked up to see Ethan still sitting in the corner booth, his coffee cup empty but his expression calm. Most customers would have left by now, but he hadn't moved. Yes, Lena admitted, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. But they're always long. He studied her quietly for a moment before standing and walking toward the counter. There was no hurry in his steps, no impatience. He moved as if time belonged to him, as if he carried no rush. "You work harder than anyone here," he said. "But it seems like no one notices." Lena gave a small laugh, though it wasn't full of joy. "That's the life of a waitress. People only notice when you make a mistake." Ethan leaned slightly against the counter. "And yet you keep going. That says a lot about you." She looked away, her hand tightening around the rag she held. Compliments felt strange, almost uncomfortable, like clothes that didn't quite fit. She wasn't used to hearing them, let alone believing them. "You don't know me," she said softly. "Not yet," Ethan replied. "But I'd like to." Lena blinked, surprised by his honesty. Few people ever cared to look beyond her uniform, beyond her smile. But here was a man who spoke as if she mattered. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because I see someone who works harder than anyone should have to. Someone who gives more than she receives. Someone who deserves more than this endless cycle." His words touched something deep inside her, something she had buried beneath long hours and silent nights. She wanted to believe him, but part of her resisted. "You make it sound like my life could change," she whispered. "It can," Ethan said firmly. "If you let it." Lena shook her head slightly, almost in disbelief. "Change takes money, education, connections. I don't have any of those." Ethan's gaze softened. "Maybe. But sometimes change begins with one choice, not with money. The choice to believe you're worth more. The choice to take a step forward, even if it's small." She was quiet, his words settling into her heart like rain soaking dry earth. Ethan hesitated, then added, "I can help you, Lena. Not by handing you money that wouldn't be fair to you. But I can give you opportunities. A way to use your strength, your kindness, your voice." Lena froze, her eyes searching his face. "Opportunities? Why would you do that for me? I'm just a stranger to you." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "Because I'm not exactly who you think I am." Her brow furrowed, confused. "I don't just come here as a customer," Ethan explained. "This diner and many others are mine. I own them." Lena's mouth parted slightly. She stared at him, unsure if she heard correctly. "You own this place?" "Yes," he said simply. "And I didn't come here tonight to play the part of an owner. I came to see the truth. To see how my diners run when no one knows I'm watching." Her heart pounded, the weight of his words sinking in. A billionaire. She had read about men like him in magazines or heard stories on the news, but she never imagined she would speak to one or that he would sit across from her with such calm humility. Her voice trembled. "And you're offering to help me?" "Yes," Ethan said, his tone gentle. "Not because you asked, and not because I pity you. But because I believe in you. I see potential in you that others overlook." Lena's breath caught. She wanted to speak, but the words tangled inside her. 1,000 doubts rose in her chest. Was this real? Could someone like him truly care about someone like her? "I don't know if I can trust that," she whispered honestly. Ethan nodded. "I understand. Trust takes time. I won't rush you. All I ask is that you don't close the door on the possibility of change." The silence between them stretched, filled only by the rain outside. Lena's hands rested on the counter, her thoughts a whirlwind. A part of her wanted to run, to hide again in the small panic room where life felt predictable. But another part, a smaller, braver part, longed to believe him. She met his eyes again, and for the first time, she didn't look away. What kind of change are you talking about? His expression warmed. The kind that gives you room to breathe. To grow. To live, not just survive. Her chest tightened, her heart beating faster than before. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. And for Ethan, that was enough. The diner lights flickered softly as Mrs. Clark stepped out of the office, reminding Lena that the night was nearly over. She quickly straightened, returning to her duties, but her mind was no longer on the dishes or the tables. It was on Ethan's words, and the door he had quietly opened in her heart. When Ethan finally left, his steps were calm, unhurried. But before he reached the door, he glanced back once, meeting her eyes across the diner. The look said more than words, "This is only the beginning." And as the bell above the door jingled, Lena realized her life might never be the same again. The next morning, Lena woke earlier than usual. The air felt different, lighter, though she couldn't explain why. She moved through her small apartment slowly, making coffee while the sun peeked through the curtains. But her mind wasn't on the coffee. It was on Ethan. Every word he had spoken lingered, repeating in her heart. This is only the beginning, don't close the door on the possibility of change. Lena sat by the window, holding her mug tightly. She wasn't sure what to believe. Could someone like Ethan really change her life? Or had she just let herself hope too much? At the diner, the morning rush began as usual. The bell jingled, orders piled up, and Lena's smile returned to her lips out of habit. Yet inside, she felt restless. The things she used to accept, the noise, the rude remarks, the endless plates, suddenly felt heavier, like chains she had never noticed before. By noon, Mrs. Clark called her into the office. "Lena," the older woman said kindly, "you've been working harder than ever. But I can see something's troubling you." Lena hesitated, then nodded. "It's nothing bad, Mrs. Clark. I'm starting to wonder if this is all I'll ever be." Mrs. Clark smiled softly, her eyes warm. "I've seen that look before. The look of someone ready for more." Those words shook Lena. Ready for more. Maybe she was. The afternoon moved slowly. Every time the bell on the door rang, Lena half expected to see Ethan again. But he didn't come. By evening, she felt foolish for even hoping. As the last tables cleared, Lena went into the back room to grab supplies. When she returned, her heart skipped. There he was, sitting at the same booth as before, calm as ever. "You came back," she whispered, surprised. "I said I would," Ethan replied gently. This time, Lena didn't hesitate. She slid into the seat across from him. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "I've been thinking about what you said. About change. About me." Ethan leaned forward, listening closely. "I don't know how to believe in myself," she admitted. "But I don't want to spend my whole life hiding in small places, panic rooms, diners, even my own doubts. I want to try. I just don't know where to begin." Ethan's eyes softened. "That's enough, Lena. Wanting to try, that's the first step." He reached into his coat and slid an envelope across the table. Lena looked at it, uncertain, then slowly opened it. Inside was a simple card, with the name of an academy written in gold letters. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a program I sponsor," Ethan explained. "Training, education, mentorship. For people with potential but no opportunity. You'd fit perfectly." Lena's throat tightened. "You're offering me a place there?" "Yes," he said. "Not as a handout, but as a chance. You'll work, you'll learn, you'll grow. It won't be easy. But you'll never be alone in it." Her fingers traced the letters on the card as tears filled her eyes. She had dreamed of opportunities like this but never thought they could be hers. "Why me?" she whispered. Ethan smiled. Because when I see you, I see strength wrapped in kindness. I see someone who doesn't realize how much light she carries. The world needs people like you. Lena blinked quickly, trying to hold back her tears. What if I fail? Then you stand up again, Ethan said firmly. Failure isn't the end. It's just part of the journey. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was full of hope. Finally, Lena nodded. I'll try. Ethan's smile widened, calm and genuine. That's all I needed to hear. The following weeks passed in a blur. Lena worked her last shifts at the diner, saying goodbye to the routine that had once defined her life. Mrs. Clark hugged her tightly on her final day, whispering, "Go chase that more, Lena." And for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was moving towards something instead of running from it. At the academy, things weren't easy. The classes were challenging, the schedules demanding. Many nights, Lena stayed up late, fighting exhaustion and doubt. But every time she thought about giving up, she remembered Ethan's words, "Don't close the door on change." Slowly, she began to grow. Her confidence, once fragile, started to strengthen. She discovered skills she never knew she had: organization, leadership, creativity. She wasn't just serving tables anymore, she was building a future. One evening, after a long day of training, she returned to her dorm and found a small note waiting for her. It was from Ethan. "Proud of you. Keep going." She held the note to her chest, smiling through her tears. Months later, Lena stood on a stage, holding a certificate of completion. Applause filled the room as she accepted it with trembling hands. In the audience, she saw Ethan watching quietly, his eyes full of pride. After the ceremony, she walked toward him, her heart full. "I never thought I'd be here," she said softly. "But you are," Ethan replied. "Because you believed in yourself." Lena shook her head slightly. "Because you believed in me first." Ethan's gaze held hers, steady and kind. Sometimes, all we need is someone to remind us of who we already are. Her chest tightened with emotion. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like a waitress hiding in the shadows. She felt like a woman stepping into her own light. And as she walked out of the hall with Ethan by her side, she knew this was more than an ending. It was a beginning.